cannot do anything. And in fact, if you look at quantum mechanics, you find that an essential element of quantum mechanics is an input from the psychological realm into the physical realm. And that's what Bohr calls the choice on the part of the experimenter as to what.
So materialism says no matter what you call consciousness, it exists, doesn't exist, it in fact is reducible to this one thing that really exists, which is the material world. So what I want to understand is the chain of logic that you would use with quantum mechanics and consciousness to defeat this materialistic, only one thing exists, everything is reduced to material.
So, as you've just said, the materialist philosophy, worldview, says that consciousness, whatever it is, doesn't do anything. It's inert, it's passive, it's causally ineffective. And so insofar as you accept classical mechanics, that's the end of the story. And these people, these neuroscientists are basically right, and you can't get around it. But why does a neuroscientist believe classical mechanics controls the brain? If you look at the details of what's going on in the brain, the nerve terminals and the flows of calcium ions in through ion channels and all these things that neurophysiologists talk about, at the bottom level, the processes are quantum mechanical. And in nonlinear systems, any uncertainties at the lower level magnify. And so in principle, you've got to treat the brain quantum mechanically.
Okay, so what are the implications of that?
And if you treat the brain quantum mechanically, then you can look and see the quantum mechanical generalizations of the laws of classical mechanics. And all they do is determine potentialities for some event to happen. In order to make quantum mechanics work, you've got to have questions posed. And there's nothing in the laws of quantum mechanics, as we know them today and as they are applied, that determine what chooses the question.
And
what chooses the question?
And that's where you add consciousness.
And in actual practice, the thing that chooses the question, and the way it's used in practice, is the experimenter has reasons for doing this and not that. There's a psychological process that causes him to do this and not that. So the way quantum mechanics actually gets around this problem, that they have a part in it, namely the choice of the question, that's not determined by the laws as we know them, is to say the laws we know them deal with the physical realm. You need another process, which is consciousness. And if consciousness, and this gives consciousness an actual role to play, and it allows consciousness to do something. And if consciousness, causally, and if consciousness can do something and does something, then materialism is out.
But does that mean that consciousness is some kind of an independent stuff, or use the word process? I'm very carefully listening to process. Is an independent process, which consciousness is, let's say, does that of itself defeat materialism? Because materialism is only one kind of stuff, the physical world.
But you've also said that the psychological realm has no causal impact. And quantum mechanics.
So once you make consciousness to have a causal impact, that
defeats materialism.
If you're posing that consciousness has an independent existence, because if you would say,
well, no, but the point is that the laws of classical mechanics, the laws as generalized to quantum mechanics, do not answer this question that needs to be answered in quantum mechanics. So you need another process. And in practice, this other process is, in fact, psychological. So quantum mechanics needs this process, which can be psychological and seems to be psychological, described in those realms, and the physical description does not describe it. So you're forced to some other process, and in fact, the only other sort of process we know is psychological, and in practice, it is psychological, that the experimenter decides on the basis of his reasons to do something.
But this psychological process is not just simply the product of the brain?
No, that's what I say. It cannot be the product of the brain, because the brain evolves according to quantum mechanical rules, and they just describe the evolution of potentialities for an event to happen. That's all they describe. They don't describe what chooses the event that's going to happen.
And this consciousness must therefore be an independent process that intervenes in a way. In actual practice, in quantum mechanics, you say the experimenter chooses on the basis of his reasons for wanting to do. So, conceivably, if you look deeper and deeper, maybe you could somehow tie it back in, but it won't tie into the quantum mechanical equations, because the quantum mechanical equations only determine the potentialities. They don't determine the actual thing. So if you believe quantum mechanics, you're forced to something that's not this physical description. It's outside that physical description. Quantum mechanics forces you to that. Nobody has seen how to make quantum mechanics work without having these choices come in. People have tried, but certainly there has been no successful way of getting around this fact that you've got to ask, that something's got to ask questions. So, quantum mechanics demands a process that's not described by the generalization of the laws of classical mechanics. It is not described by this deterministic process that deals with physical properties. It demands a question. And it's not described in the physical reality. Therefore, and the way it actually works in practice is that it is described by a psychological process. So you seem to need a psychological process. And certainly the physical process will not do the job. The physical process, as we understand it in quantum mechanics, will not do the job. Therefore, you need to say that consciousness is efficacious, it has effects, and if it has effects, then materialism is dead.